Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, my rich, entitled psycho neighbor Karen thought he is entitled to using my private disabled parking spot on my property. I was in the right when getting him towed, however, he used this as an excuse to start a war with me and setting my car on fire. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. So for context, I am an amputee and need a wheelchair to make my daily commute. My best childhood friend and I are colleagues, and since he lives just next door, he's usually the one who picks me up and drops me off. We use my car because it has the modifications for the wheelchair and thus it stands in front of my house in its designated and paid for parking spot. My friend and I moved into this small town for our college and just never left. Things changed, for example my missing leg, but we stood together through thick and thin. The neighborhood became familiar to us over time, and the fact that people here understood my problem made it easier to settle nicely and peacefully. Well, peacefully until rich people started moving in. And I use the quotation marks because these are the kind of people who have inherited almost every bit of their richness from their parents, but have absolutely no knowledge on how to maintain it. The kind of people who love to drive in their BMWs and scoff towards us middle-class people, blatantly looking down on us. One such person recently opened a car wash downtown and bought the house next to mine. He was as rich as they could get with his brand new Tesla and flashy sunglasses and the general disgust towards other people of this town. I honestly did not care about his behavior until one evening when my friend and I were coming back from work and found this man's Tesla standing in my paid disabled parking spot. I looked over at his house where there was clearly enough space for him to park his car. My friend decided to get out of my car and knock on his door, hoping that this was just a mistake, but I knew it wasn't. The rich man came out looking all irritated, and when my friend asked him to move his car, the guy yelled at my friend to not disturb him for such stupid little things. My friend then tried to explain that I am an amputee, to which the rich man replied, "Not my burden," and slammed the door on my friend's face. Anyway, I somehow managed and my friend escorted me inside, but not before clicking the picture of the rich man's car. I immediately called the police, but before they could arrive, I saw the rich man driving away on a bike while throwing a middle finger at my house. If I was not gonna get back at him before, now I definitely was. As soon as the police arrived, I narrated the event that had transpired before this and provided all legal documents that proved that the spot where this Tesla stood was in fact a privately owned disabled parking spot. Everything happened pretty quickly after that, and soon enough his Tesla was being towed away and my friend put my car back in its spot. I retired for the night knowing full well that there will be a confrontation happening the next day. Though what I did not expect was to have my phone ringing at about 5 AM, my neighbor across the street calling me to inform me about my burning car. And yes, you read that right. I called my friend up and cautiously made my way outside to see fire blazing inside my car. Thankfully, my neighbor, a middle-aged man who had a routine of getting up early for a nice jog, had already called the firefighters and they arrived pretty soon, though still not quickly enough to save my car. I called the police as well, who arrived a few minutes after the firefighters. My neighbor explained what he saw when he first got out of his house, though he did not see any person nearby. Good for me, I had CCTV installed all around the house, mostly because I was anxious that robbers might think an amputee's house could be the easiest to rob. We watched the recording together, and to absolutely no one's shock, it was the blurry image of my rich neighbor in the video. Even though he wore a mask, he could clearly be seen coming out of his house and going back inside as well. And well, that made things easy. Police also found a Molotov in the backseat of my car, the same that the man in the recording was seen carrying. They knocked on this rich guy's door, who opened the door with an innocent face. He played the fool and pretended as if he knew nothing before suggesting having this conversation in the police station. I found that pretty weird until the realization hit me. This man thought that he could bribe the police, which might have worked in any different town or city, but the police force here was extremely strict when it came to taking bribes. Not because the people here were saints or anything, but because the previous officer was jailed after he was exposed for taking millions of dollars as bribes, which brought a bad name to the whole police force. And when I visited the police station that evening, my suspicions were confirmed. The rich guy was behind bars for not only causing private property damage, but he was also fined for trying to bribe an on-duty police officer. I decided to press charges and have the rich and psycho man pay for all the damages. Maybe this was a good point to drop the matter and move on with my life, but after seeing the status of my car, one that I had worked on so hard to make it perfect for me and my condition, I knew I could not just drop the matter here. Instead, I asked the officer's permission to post about the incident, and after being greenlit, I decided to take this rich man's actions to Facebook. Though our town was not huge, it was still quite populated and very tightly knit. My words spread like wildfire, prompting angry responses from my people and even a few helping hands that offered to pay for the damages. I honestly wasn't sure what exactly I wanted to accomplish by posting this, but when this man got a temporary bail after he hired a lawyer, because he stupidly thought that he could pay his way out of this, he was almost swarmed as he made his way to his house. People did not hold back their remarks as they cursed him and called him names, and while I'm not someone who supports bullying of any kind, it was still pretty gratifying to watch his ego shredded in public. Anyway, weeks passed by in court, which ends in my favor. The man tried all kinds of tactics, but the evidence I had were too strong, even after his bribing attempts. Now the rich guy was fined with an even bigger fine for wasting my time and the time of the court. On top of that, amidst all the chaos, it was also revealed that this rich man's car wash was guilty of tax evasion, which meant his business was being shut down. Honestly, I did not want him to suffer this many damages, but I would be lying if I said I was not satisfied with how things turned out. My neighbors continued with rude remarks and taunts until after a month we saw a big on sale sign on the rich man's property. This was the cherry on the top, and I could not be any happier. And the next one is titled, Malicious Compliance is Fine. So I work as an audiovisual tech at a community college. Basically deal with sound systems, projectors, microphones, etc. I joke that anything that plugs in on campus that's not a computer, that's my gig. We get occasional requests for sound systems in bigger classrooms and common areas, not hard setups at all. Someone wants to make a presentation and they want to be heard clearly, so we will set up a microphone on a floor stand, usually above a podium or desk, and run cables to the actual sound system, which is usually an all-in-one unit that has the amp, equalizer and speaker all together. Set up on a tripod in the corner of a room, it can easily be loud enough for a room of 100 people or so. Anything bigger and we adjust by adding a second speaker or giving them a beefier system with separate components, amp, equalizer, input boxes, etc. on a card. Even for bigger sound systems, they still don't really take up that much space in an area if you know what you're doing. This happened years ago. I got a request from a communications arts instructor, a speech class. She wanted her classes to experience what it would be like to speak in front of a larger audience, so she requested a microphone for a large classroom that we had, an older simple lecture hall that held about 140 people. She was having a few different classes all show up at the same time and place, so the room would be packed. I called and talked with the speech lady about the specifics for her request, letting her know what the setup involved. This is not that big of a deal, I just need a microphone, one microphone. She said, a little snotty. I started to explain that for a room that size, with possibly over 100 people attending, she might want to make sure that they are heard and go with the bigger system. Oh, we don't need all that other stuff, just a microphone. One microphone, that's it, nothing more. I was getting instructions for my job from someone who actually taught how to give a speech. I hesitated one last time, starting to tell her that for a sound system to work, you need actual things like speakers and cables, but she said nothing else. Just a microphone, with a slight shouty Karen-esque voice. Is this where I say cue malicious compliance? Well, the day of the event arrives. I walk into the room, weaving in and out of students to get to the instructor who was standing at a desk at the front of the class. I walked up smiling. Are you Mrs. Speech Lady? Oh yes, did you have our mic? She said in an excited voice, ready to excite her students with sound. I held out a handheld microphone to her. Here you go. She took the microphone a bit gingerly, then I turned and started to make my way out. I looked behind me and saw Speech Lady, a person with a doctorate mind you, looking at the microphone like it was some weird alien device. She started tapping on it, speaking into it, looking at the sides and bottom, and then slapping it with her hand, blowing onto it, and finally yelling into it. I could tell a few of the students knew what sound systems were, they were not that hard, when I saw some giggles from the seats at the confused teacher's reaction. I turned back around as I was about to leave the room to see her waving me back over. Still a lot of students filing in. I go back over. How do you work this? I don't see any switches or anything, and I don't hear my voice getting louder. She actually said this all trying to speak into the microphone as if the sound would magically be amplified in mid-air. I smirked and said, "Oh, you wanted to make you louder? Well, for that you're gonna need," I actually did air quotes, "all that other stuff." She still looked confused, but I could tell light was starting to creep into her brain. I turned and again started on my way out while she called out, "Wait, I guess I need— wait." I could have been a prick and just walked out from there, but the students did not deserve any bad because of their stupid teacher. I had brought one of our portable sound systems with me to the lecture hall but kept it outside the room. I walked back in and set it up in about 3 minutes, placing the unit on a tripod and the mic on a boom stand and an XLR cable connecting the mic to the system. I gave it the briefest of sound checks by simply saying, "Loud noises, thanks Anchorman," and turned to go for good this time. During the quick setup, Speech Lady was apologizing to me until she was blue in the face, but then she gained her composure quickly after my sound check. She turned out to be cool, writing me an email apology of sorts and thanking me for my help after her supersized class. And the next one is titled The Owner's Wife. This story is about 1.5 years ago, so I will try to remember as far as I could. I am male, 18 years old. My parents own a little restaurant where we sell snacks, cakes, candies and various fast foods. It was named after my grandparents, so let's call it Joe's, which is a fake name. Whenever I get free time, I usually hang out there with my friends to have something, and I do pay, which also encourages my friends to pay up too, which I earn by working at Joe's specifically on weekends as it becomes a bit busy then, like serving people or taking orders from them, and yes, we do have employees. My dad allows me to keep the tip money, which the customers give after eating, and anyways, my dad also pays me for the hours I work. Now on to the story. A very few of the regular customers know that I am the son of the owner, and my parents, the owners, also work there themselves, but people often tend to think of them as employees. One day on a weekend, a woman, I don't know, might be in her 30s or 40s, I'm not good at guessing age, entered with her bratty kid who I suppose was around 13 or so. Now, as it was a weekend, it was a little bit busy. She was told to sit on one of the waiting chairs. Around 20 minutes or so, a table was ready for her. She sat there and I went to ask for her orders. Now, I don't exactly remember what she ordered, might be a sandwich or so, I don't know, and I went to the kitchen to give the order. Now, I was just standing near the register to look for if somebody needed anything, and her bratty kid was running around screaming, running into people, stepping on people's foots, even touching their food. The mother, as usual, did not seem to care and was just on her phone. I was already very annoyed by this, and I held the kid by his hand while he was running and told him not to run around anymore in a pretty harsh voice, and the kid started crying and ran back to his mom. Her mother, fumed by this, came to me, stomping. This is how the conversation went as far as I remember. "How dare you touch my child?" Me, "He was running around and was annoying other people. Didn't you see that he was touching other people's food?" EM, "Well, he's a child. He can do whatever he wants to do." Me, "Yeah, not in my supervision." EM, "Do you even know who I am?" Me, thinking, here we go again. I've read a lot of stories like this here, never thought something like this would ever happen to me, as I always thought people over-exaggerated things, but no, these were actually real. I knew what was gonna happen, so I thought of playing along. Me, "No ma'am, I don't." EM, "Well then you should know that I'm the wife of the owner, and you have made a mistake hurting my son, and I will make sure your face would never be seen here, because I'm getting you fired." Me, thinking in my mind, I thought she would go for a sister or a friend, but she went for a wife, and now we're gonna have some fun. Me, "Ma'am, I don't think you even know his—" She cuts me off. EM, "His name is—" my OP's dad's name. I was kind of shocked that she knows my dad's name. A very few people know that anyways. Me, "Ma'am, I'm very sorry that I acted rude towards your son, but please don't get me fired. It's the only job I have." EM, "You should have thought about that before you hit my son." Me, "But ma'am, he was—" She again cuts me off and says, "Shut up." She went to the register and asked for the manager. My dad came out and talked to her about what happened. EM then says, "Your employee has been harassing my son. I want him to be fired." My dad now looking at me, "Dad, I'm sorry for the inconveniences, but I just cannot fire him without any reason." EM again with her Bs, "Do you even know who you are talking to? I'm the wife of the owner of Joe's and I cannot stand the employees hitting my son." My dad having the biggest grin on his face, EM, "Why are you laughing? I'm serious." Dad, I'm again saying I'm sorry for the inconveniences caused and would you like to have a refund? EM went total rage mode. "You know what? I'm calling my husband and complaining about you and your employee. I will get both of you fired." Now, the way she got my dad's number is because we had it on our board outside as we gave home delivery so people would order on call and you got it. I'm not gonna explain that. She called the number and my dad's phone rang. Karen was shocked. He picked up the phone and said, "Dad, hello, this is OP, the owner of Joe's. How can I help you?" Karen's face went red to complete white, like if blood was drained from her. He then said, "Yes, I'm the owner and manager of Joe's, and you are in no way my wife, and the employee you want to be fired is my son." She looked at me and I just could not hold back my laugh anymore. And just then her order was ready, but until then she was already embarrassed enough with the whole time her kid crying in the background. She dragged her crying kid by the arm, did not even took the order, and we still have a great laugh about it. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm curious, if you have ever worked in a restaurant, have you ever dealt with any customers that claim to know the owner but actually don't? Let us know in the comments, I would love to hear your stories. Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled, "Neighbor built a cinder block wall in the middle of my driveway, claiming half of it belongs to him." This story is not about me, but actually about my dad and what happened between him and a neighbor. My dad lives alone, and since he is older, people think that means they can push him around and get away with it. Those people are dead wrong though. This was not really an issue though, because in the neighborhood everyone seemed to know and love my father. The house next to him got sold and knocked down years ago without having any buyers until one day someone finally bought the land in order to build themselves a house. This was fine with my dad and he was not even upset that he would be needing to listen to the construction noises daily. Then he came home and saw that there was a line of cinder blocks on his driveway. Keep in mind, he has what I at least call a double driveway where two cars can fit side by side. About halfway was the line and he was a little annoyed, thinking that the workers were storing their stuff like that. When he looked closer though, my dad saw that they were actually cemented into the ground of his driveway. He was not having any of this and went to go talk to his neighbor. "Dad, excuse me." Neighbor, "Hello, can I help you with something?" "Dad, I live next door and I want to know why your builders put down cinder blocks on my property." Neighbor, "On the driveway?" "Oh no, I told them to do that. Half of it is mine after all, and I didn't really want the driveway there anyway." "Dad, actually the entire thing is on my property, so..." The neighbor cut him off immediately. "Listen, old man, maybe it's because you're too old and forgetting things, but only half of that driveway is yours." He turned away from my dad and didn't see just how angry he was. My dad was not gonna lie down and get bullied while having his property destroyed. He asked me to come over and help him search through the boxes of papers in the basement until we found the deed to the house. With it was a map of the property lines which showed that the entire driveway really was his. I offered to talk to the neighbor for him again, but he refused and didn't want me getting directly involved any more than I already was. It didn't stop me though from getting the info about what happened next out of him. It turns out that the neighbor did not seem to care about the deed and he had called the town to try and get them to come and intervene. They said that they could, but it might take months before anyone was able to come out and get this sorted. Normally he was patient, but in a situation like this he was not going to just sit and wait. He called the local news station and it turned out that they were very interested in this story. So he told them what happened and they even went over with a camera crew to see the blocks along the driveway. The story spread like wildfire and soon the neighborhood that my dad had always loved was rallying up behind him and calling for the man to remove the cinder blocks for the town to do something about it. The neighbor refused to get on camera and comment, so the image that the news gave him was extremely unflattering. Everyone now hated this guy and he hadn't even moved in yet because the construction was not finished. My dad knew that if any of the workers started to try and dig up on his driveway, he would have to call the police for trespassing. However, that luckily never ended up happening. Instead, the man stuck to his guns that the land should have been his and he had every right to have that line of cinder blocks cemented into my dad's driveway. To be honest, we had no idea what someone could have even been wanting with that little amount of extra space sectioned off. Nothing worked though and the blocks remained, but my dad did not waver and knew that he couldn't stop until his land was returned back to the way it was supposed to be. The news had helped him once, and although the story died down, he knew that they never got a chance to speak to his neighbor. This time, the new neighbor finally agreed to be interviewed. My guess is that he found out that the whole town hated him and realized that he needed to do something to avoid being public enemy number one. It actually started off really rough with him once again, just claiming that the property belonged to him and my dad did not understand it. He was once again shown the papers and at that point did not have much of anything to say. He knew the whole town was disappointed with him and it seemed like he was going to stay on his denial train as far as it would take him. That was when the news reporter once again showed him the papers that proved that part of the land belonged to my dad and was not part of the plot that he purchased to build a house on. He fell silent after that and didn't have much else to say to the person interviewing him. Now, I know that around this point is when you are used to something big and exciting happening, some kind of sick revenge or maybe the town finally showing up and forcing him to remove them, but instead, though, what happened was that the man actually went up to my dad and started to apologize. He said that when he got the land he was told his line was there and already had everything planned before my dad showed him the papers. He then went ahead and removed all the cinder blocks and apologized to my dad. Honestly, I'm the type of person that likes to get a little revenge for those that have wronged me. My dad was not like that at all though. Neighbor removing the cinder blocks was honestly the only thing that he really wanted, and he did not want any revenge past that. He was not the type of person to get revenge on people, he had just refused to be pushed over by a bully and letting him have his way. It's honestly the thing that I respect most about my father, and I hope that one day I can actually act like him instead of being the kind of person that just wants to get revenge on everyone that upsets me. Either way, he now has his full driveway and has yet to speak to that neighbor again, but he doesn't have any problems with him either, which is the important part. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would sort of agree with that, because if you always try to get revenge on people, especially when it is about neighbors, you sooner or later might burn yourself in some way or another, because it is very likely that you have to live next to these people for the next, who knows, 10 or 20 years or maybe even more, so it can be beneficial to stand back a little bit, although that does not mean that you should give in to bullies. Always stand up for yourself. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, I want to ask you for a favor. If you have watched until here, please check out my new channel called The Readers, where I and other voice actors post daily stories that you will very much enjoy. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again tomorrow.